In Santa Clara, nobody has the right to fall asleep at the wheel with the title window this wide open. Today's conversation is loaded because it touches draft mistakes, a chance to attack the market with real conviction, serious tension on the blind side, and one more sign that shows whether this franchise is going to move like a giant or think small. And I'm telling you right now, a team that wants to get back to the Super Bowl cannot handle big decisions with fear. So if you live 49ers football down to the details, subscribe right now and come with me, because these 4 stories demand a real fan reaction. Because the first story today does not just hit the memory of this fan base, it hits the pride, and it hits hard. Every year, people go back to that old draft debate. Do you draft for need, or do you take the best player available? But for the 49ers, this is not some abstract football argument. This has turned into a history of scars. When you go back through some of the John Lynch-era decisions, the feeling is not just missed opportunity. It feels like the foundation of a championship slipped right through this team's hands. Solomon Thomas was the pick in 2017, while Jonathan Allen and Marlon Humphrey were still sitting there. Then came Mike McGlinchey in 2018, and Minkah Fitzpatrick ended up somewhere else. In 2021, all that capital burned to move up for Trey Lance opened the door to an even harsher thought. If that move had gone differently, San Francisco could have walked away with Mac Jones, or even reached Patrick Surtain II and Devontae Smith with way less damage to its assets. And that is where this stops being nostalgia and turns into a warning. Because when people start imagining what this defense could have looked like with Humphrey, Surtain, Minkah, and Brian Branch all in the secondary, that is not empty fantasy. That is a real line of names that passed through the board while the franchise tried to outsmart the room. That stings because contenders cannot keep losing margin on decisions this big. And now the past comes right back into the present with Kadyn Proctor entering the conversation. He shows up as one of Alabama's major talents in this draft, an offensive tackle with ridiculous physical tools, rare movement skills, and a ceiling high enough to make any offensive line better. Yes, there are consistency questions. Yes, some people think he might even be better inside. But honestly, for the 49ers, that does not shrink the conversation. It makes it bigger. Because San Francisco cannot keep playing games with the future of this protection like it can always deal with it later. Trent Williams is still a monster, but the calendar does not stop. The body keeps collecting mileage, and the blind side is not a problem you can push off forever. If Proctor lands in a realistic range, or even looks worth a controlled move up, this franchise needs to act with conviction. After all these years of letting premium talent go by, the last thing the Niners can do now is repeat the same mistake and call it patience. The second story is the kind that exposes who is really reading the league the right way and who is still reacting late. Because this draft is being talked about as one that could bring more trades, mainly because the class does not have the same depth, and that changes everything for a team like the San Francisco 49ers. When the top of the board gets thinner, value starts moving in weird ways. Picks stop being just picks. They become currency to move up, move around, turn into a proven player, attack a real weakness, or stop a major need from being pushed down the road. And in that kind of environment, the name Kayvon Thibodeaux enters the conversation with enough force that Santa Clara has to pay real attention. If the smoke around the Giants turns into something real during draft weekend, the Niners cannot be sitting back watching. Thibodeaux still carries the weight of being a former top 5 pick, and that alone makes a lot of people twist the evaluation when the production does not explode the way the hype once promised. But that is not the point here. The point is the fit. And once you start looking at the fit, this gets really interesting. He is still an edge with burst off the snap. He still showed real production when healthy. He still has the athletic tools to create problems over and over again. And if he landed in San Francisco, he would not have to walk in as the face of the pass rush. That changes everything. Because lining up next to Nick Bosa, inside a rotation that badly needs more physical presence and more juice up front, Thibodeaux would not have to carry the entire load. He would need to win reps, beat tackles, muddy up the pocket, and contribute with consistency. That is a completely different ask. The shoulder injury from last season matters. The fact that his contract is heading into the final year matters too. But this is where smart contenders see something before everybody else does. Sometimes the market gets cheaper exactly when the doubt starts scaring off less confident teams. And if the price really drops into that day 3 range, maybe built around multiple 4th-round picks, San Francisco needs to come hard after that. That would not be reckless. That would be an aggressive, calculated buy. A way to make the team better without giving away premium draft capital, while taking advantage of a moment where the player might return far more than the price tag says. And honestly, if that kind of opportunity is sitting there and the 49ers choose passivity, then this is not about a lack of options. That is a lack of nerve. And now the conversation gets tight for real, because this is not about a flashy name to excite the fan base on draft night. This is about a decision that could hit the core of the defense. The 49ers are going into this weekend almost pushed into adding an edge rusher, whether that comes through the draft board or through a trade. And the problem is simple. When you are picking late in the first round, you usually are not landing a ready-made star at that position. League history is brutal with teams that pretend otherwise. Sure, there are some big hits, but most of the time that range gets you a useful player, a good piece, an interesting athlete. Changing the math of an entire defensive front is a different level. That is why the profile discussion matters so much for San Francisco right now. When names like TJ Parker and Keldrick Falk start showing up around pick 27, this is not about combine highlights or social media hype. This is about who has real NFL structure and can walk in without blowing up the defensive plan. Parker stands out because the pressure is consistent, the effort is real, the leverage is there, the length shows up, and he does not need flash to win reps. He is not the kind of pass rusher that is going to set the internet on fire with every move, but he plays the kind of football coaches trust. Falk brings a different kind of intrigue, more length, more physical mystery, more of that feeling that there is a defender in there who can wreck plays in different ways if the development hits. Both make sense for a team that needs to stop fantasizing about solutions and start stacking real power into the rotation. And if the conversation slides into round 2, Gabe Jacas and Danny Dennis-Sutton make it even more interesting. Jacas plays with violence, serious strength, active hands, and that kind of energy where he is not just trying to survive the snap. He is trying to wreck the play. Dennis-Sutton feels like a different kind of problem. Taller, explosive, disruptive, with a pressure rate that forces any coordinator to take notice. The central point is simple, and it is harsh. The Niners do not need another name to fill out a chart. They need somebody who takes weight off Nick Bosa and stops this defensive line from turning into a hope-based operation. So let me throw this straight to the fan base. If the board falls this way, are you taking the safer edge who looks ready to help right away? Or are you betting on the more terrifying physical ceiling to chase bigger impact down the line? Because at this pick, missing out because of panic or overconfidence could cost way too much. The fourth story hits a point no 49ers fan can look at without feeling it. Because when the subject is Trent Williams, this is not just about a left tackle. This is about a piece that still carries respect, physical identity, and security for this offense to function like a real title contender. And that is exactly why the situation feels so delicate. There is confidence that a deal can get done. There is a sense that talks are moving. But there is also very real tension between what the player sees as fair value and what the franchise is willing to pay at this stage of his career. The age matters, the money matters, the timing might matter even more. And this is where outside analysis starts getting lazy. Because looking at Trent as he gets closer to 38 and reducing everything to automatic decline is weak analysis. What he brings goes way beyond age on a contract sheet. He still changes the offensive line. He still changes how opposing defenses behave. He still changes the level of confidence this team can have calling certain plays. But the other side is real too. If San Francisco were fully comfortable with the current numbers, this deal would already be pushed through with a lot less noise. The fact that it has not happened tells you exactly where the franchise is trying to balance win-now urgency with financial responsibility. And that balance gets even more sensitive when the reported framework would still give Trent major guarantees over the next 2 years, while placing him below some of the younger elite tackles in average annual value. The problem is that a negotiation like this does not stay frozen in place. The closer the draft gets, the more speculation builds, the more the storyline grows, and the more this thing starts threatening to become a distraction. And that is the last kind of noise Kyle Shanahan needs heading toward training camp. Because if this drags, the conversation changes fast from, will he extend, to, does this team need to find the replacement right now? And that shifts the whole mood in a totally unnecessary way for a roster that should be focused on attacking the season. San Francisco may be able to find alternatives in the draft or on the market, but replacing Trent Williams as a leader, presence, and immediate effect is not as simple as swapping out one piece for another. That is why this negotiation needs firm control from both sides. The player wants to be treated like someone who is still decisive. The team wants to protect the books without weakening its own ambition. And when a franchise in a Super Bowl window gets pulled into that kind of tug of war, every extra day without a resolution starts costing more than it looks like. At the end of the day, the message coming out of Santa Clara is heavy and simple at the same time. The 49ers are not at a point in this cycle where they can misread the board, miss an opening, or let a situation drag out because nobody wants to make the call. The draft demands precision, the market demands courage, and the Trent situation demands big franchise control. That is what separates a talented team from one that is truly ready to get back to the Super Bowl. Now that is the pressure. Move like a real contender. If you follow the Niners with that same intensity, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell, because we are back tomorrow.